All right, everybody, I am finally back with a brand new DC update. And I'm sorry I didn't have time to do one yesterday. I was actually on vacation visiting my daughter in Vegas over the weekend and had a bunch of stuff I had to deal with when I got back. And so I was not able to get up a formal update yesterday. But we're going to talk more about Superman today and how this studio is so bullish about this film, even though it's only been out for not even a week now. And I will not lie, it had a successful weekend, but not a massively successful weekend. Didn't come anywhere near Man of Steel's numbers. And it also had a respectable Monday, making, I think it was $13 million on Monday, which is not, I mean, that's pretty high for a Monday, after a film has been released. But we got the Smurfs coming up. We got Fantastic Four. I think this movie is going to take a big nosedive this coming weekend, and we'll see if they're projecting a 50% drop-off. We'll see if it ends up being even more than that. And they're really shilling for this movie. They are pushing for those reviews, and this is the one thing that's unfortunate about this, is that some people put too much stock in reviews, and you can't do that. You cannot look at Rotten Tomatoes, because Rotten Tomatoes, first of all, the critics are bought and paid for. You cannot trust the critic score, and that's the one that they end up showing to the general public. But the audience score is also pretty high too, but I've mentioned this in the past, that if it's 2.5 or higher, they consider that positive, when the film is actually very mediocre. Superman is a generic film. It's a generic superhero film. There is nothing special about it. There is nothing memorable about it. There's nothing in the film that people are going to be talking about for years to come. In fact, a lot of it is utter nonsense. But we're going to look at the absolute shilling from the studio. They're going to forge forward with this 10-year plan. Come hell or high water, they are determined to do it. They are not willing to give the fans what they want. They're going to be producing slop. And we're going to be looking at this here today. But let's take a look at all of the things that I've grabbed. There's going to be quite a few things I need to cover since I haven't had an update since really before the movie got released. But let's take a look. First up, we have David Corenswet talking about Henry Cavill and Man of Steel. David Corenswet praises Henry Cavill and Zack Snyder's version of Superman for exploring a darker side of the character. It was not a darker side of the character, but he goes on to say, just like Nolan took Batman and did something darker and more grounded with the character, Zack Snyder and Henry Cavill explored a side of Superman that hadn't been explored on the big screen. The one way they become boring is if you just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And that's him taking a shot at saying, we're not going to do the same thing that Man of Steel did. When in reality, they're going back and doing something with the character that would have been okay 50 years ago, instead of for modern audiences. They did something different. They made Henry Cavill more human, more, I think, relatable than what they did even with David Corenswet. All of the themes that they did with David Corenswet and Superman were so glazed over that you have no time to really explore those ideas or appreciate them because of how quickly the movie moved. They just jammed so much into Superman that it was ridiculous. Also, when Superman got released, you can see that there were people posting the exact same review for Superman. And it started with Grace Randolph. And you can see that all these people, these were studio bots. These were people that I am sure the studio put out there to promote all of this. And you can see it's a direct copy and paste. This was something that was probably sent by the studio, and I don't know this is a fact, but this is probably something that was sent by the studio to these individuals to post. And it's ridiculous that they all said the exact same things. It's very crazy. People are being brainwashed. Now, this goes to show you the absolute shilling that some of these outlets were doing for Superman. DC Film News posted this, and it says, look up, Superman is poised to soar with 130 plus million domestic opening and 200 million global opening projections. It came short of both of those projections, by the way. It goes on to say, with glowing reviews and strong buzz, global totals could climb past $230 million, making this the biggest solo Superman debut since Man of Steel. Since Man of Steel? Exactly how many solo Superman films have come out since Man of Steel? Oh yeah, that number is 0. So they can make this claim with absolutely nothing to back it up because there hasn't been a solo Superman film since Man of Steel. And Superman and Man of Steel did outperform Superman even without inflation taken into account. And we were getting every single excuse under the book as to why this underperformed, especially overseas. And also here in the U.S., they're saying, oh, it's post-pandemic. People just aren't going to the movies anymore. People are having superhero fatigue. They're making all these excuses. And the reality is that the box office is 25% lower than what it was pre-pandemic. 25% lower. Well, Man of Steel sold anywhere from 33% to over 50% more tickets in its opening weekend than Superman did, which means people are just not as interested. While this is a decent opening, it is not a blockbuster opening. If you had come out with Man of Steel 2, I guarantee you would have made more money than this. And that's a sad thing. We traded one for something that is less than. James Gunn says he has recently spoken with Ryan Coogler, who did Creed and Black Panther and Sinners, to do something in the DCU. Now, we don't know what this is. We don't know what it could possibly be, but your guess is as good as anybody's. Now, I thought this was very, 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 very bizarre, but this comes from Variety, and this talks about how, and I don't have the part of it in here where it talks about how, James Gunn would curse at the actors, but it says David Corenswet says James Gunn would yell directions at you from the monitors on the Superman set, which is not how directors generally work. He goes on to say you usually do the scene, they say cut, and then they come and say very privately and quietly, I love that moment where you did this. What if we tried something else in the next one? Gunn style would throw lots of actors off, and understandably so, Corenswet told GQ. The second that happened, I went, okay, this is going to be great because I have no idea what I'm doing. I desperately need a director. I need a director who knows what they want and is willing to say it out loud without too much politeness and without beating around the bush. If I'm no good, tell me I'm no good, and then let's work together to make me good. Very weird statement to make. He is putting all the ownership on James Gunn, which he should, because I didn't really have a problem with Superman, with David Corenswet's acting as Superman. The portrayal of Superman I did have a problem with. It's not your traditional Superman. He is beat up the entire film. The dog has to save him on multiple occasions because he can't do it himself. And it's just a very weird version of Superman. Now, this is in regards to the Lantern show that is coming up. And Nathan Fillion is going to be in the show. And he says that Guy Gardner will drop many F-bombs in Lanterns. He said, I've dropped more F-bombs in that project than I have in, I think, my entire career put together. Oh, joy. Oh, this is exactly what I want from DC. I want the crass F this, F that version of DC. Bring it on. This is not what anybody is asking for. It's juvenile. It's what Peacemaker was. It's like this studio wants to go either stupid with it or they want to go in the other direction, go Tarantino with it. I don't understand this line of thinking. He doesn't do this in the comics. It doesn't make sense to have the character do it in the show either. But again, it's James Gunn's universe. It's what he does. He's a juvenile. James Gunn is a juvenile. And of course, James Gunn is reportedly considering TV spinoffs of both Mr. Terrific and Jimmy Olsen. I could understand something maybe with Mr. Terrific in it, but Jimmy Olsen? Really? Now, this was all over the place this last week, where it says David Zaslav reportedly dismissed developing Ta-Nehisi's Coates, I don't know how you say his name, Coates' Black Superman movie in 2022, calling it too woke. That would be interesting. I'm sure it didn't have to do with just the character being black. I am sure that there was more to it to come to that decision. And if it was too woke for David Zaslav, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Now, it was announced over this weekend, too, that the budget for Superman is reportedly $225 million. It was definitely higher than that. And Warner Brothers' goal, their only goal is to gross over $500 million globally, and they'll be happy with that. That doesn't even make the money back for the film. They did spend over $200 million on this to advertise it. Now they're only saying it's $100 million, which everyone knows it was $200 million. If you've seen what they've done, you can definitely tell it was over $100 million. And you add that on to the budget, they do have to make between $600 and $700 million for this to even start making a profit. I don't see it doing that at the theater. So it didn't even make half of what it needed in its opening weekend. Movies that don't do that usually don't make their money back. We don't know what the legs are going to be on this, but I think it's going to take a big nosedive, but we'll see. I would be surprised if it even hits $500 million. I always said it was going to be under that, and I still believe it's going to be under that. But you got to remember, Man of Steel made like $668 million 12 years ago, which would be almost $1 billion in today's money. This is going to make half of that. Half. And that is with ticket prices being double what they used to be, which means it's really making a quarter, probably a quarter of what Man of Steel grossed for the studio 12 years ago. Think about that. That's some crazy stuff. Now, this made me laugh out loud. James Gunn had no clue what Marvel phases really meant. And he goes, someone asked him, how would you explain the phases? James Gunn said, I have no clue what any of that stuff ever meant. So all he did is come to DC and change the name from phases to chapters. That's all he did. And he's going through the exact same thing that the former Warner Brothers regime would do, where they would announce a bunch of stuff and then cancel it, announce a bunch of stuff and then cancel it. It's this vicious cycle, and it's no different with James Gunn at all. In fact, it's worse. Also, it was announced that David Zaslav reportedly met with The Rock to discuss fixing DC, but the talks ended soon after Black Adam underperformed at the box office. And it's okay for Black Adam to underperform, but not Superman. Superman is not going to make its money back for what they spent to make it. Black Adam, actually, I believe, did make a profit. And what's crazy about this is it was The Rock's biggest opening weekend ever of his career. But that didn't meet the expectations of what they wanted, so they rebooted everything. It doesn't make any sense. The movies that make a profit for the studio, they throw those to the side, but the ones that don't make a profit, they hold them up like they're gold. So it's the same thing they did with James Gunn's Suicide Squad. Also, IGN reported that when James Gunn and Peter Safran became the DC Studio CEOs, they canned a third Wonder Woman film starring Gal Gadot set in the present day. I'm hoping this more has to do with the reboot than anything else, but James Gunn had come out and said that he had talked to Gal about doing another film and that they were planning it. But this clearly sets the record straight, saying that didn't happen. Also, they released what the actors made for Superman, and I thought this was very low. But it said reported salaries for the Superman cast. David Corenswet made $750,000. Rachel Brosnahan also got paid $750,000. So think about that. She wasn't in the movie nearly as much as David Corenswet, but she made just as much money. And we're talking Superman and Lois Lane here, and that's all they got. Nicholas Hoult, on the other hand, made $2 million. His performance was not a $2 million performance. And it says all three are in the line for box office bonuses if the film performs. I don't know if that means it has to make money or just what the studio deems, okay, it just made $500 million, we're good with that. Now, I thought this was kind of funny. David Corenswet yelled F you in character at Rachel Brosnahan while filming Superman. He goes on to say that the way she delivered one particular line made me sort of involuntarily say, oh, F you. She caught me off guard and made me feel hurt in that moment. And that comes from People magazine. This made me crack up as well because this was the headline on Monday that David Zaslav champions new DC Universe and bold 10-year plan after Superman box office victory. The vision is clear. The momentum is real. After one weekend. How ridiculous is that? They're not going to willingly admit if they screwed up. They're just going to forge forward. David Zaslav does not admit defeat. I've never seen the head of a studio be able to BS his way through stuff the way he does, and I'm sure investors cannot be happy. Now, this comes from Nexus Point News. It is reported that Clayface was originally set in Matt Reeves' The Batman Epic Crime Saga before the movie was moved to James Gunn's DC slate. Matt Reeves is still attached to produce the movie for DC. This is what James Gunn does. He likes to take stuff from other people and use it as his own. And I believe that this is a big reason as to why the Batman 2 has been delayed so much. Also, this comes from IMDb that Fantastic Four First Steps is set to outperform Superman on its opening weekend by a large margin, with more than $160 million domestically. That would be a kick in the pants. That would really show. I hope this happens. And it will show you just how much the audience has no confidence in Warner Brothers and the way they run things. I really hope DC gets sold off. I hope Warner Brothers gets sold off. This was really funny. Jurassic World Rebirth leads China box office again as Superman debuts at number 4. Superman was at number 4 in its opening weekend, and Jurassic World Rebirth was still number 1 in several different countries around the world for Superman's opening weekend. That's pretty crazy. Now, this is very telling. So, the studio, like I said, was shilling after the weekend just to show how popular it was. And it says Superman soars to the top of the box office with $220 million global opening. And someone pointed out that when Man of Steel came out, it made $225 million in 24 markets, whereas Superman made $217 million in 78 markets. Think about that for a minute. And these are real numbers. These aren't made-up numbers. Man of Steel outperformed Superman in every category in its opening weekend, and it was 12 years ago. And people were like, well, that's at a time when Man of Steel was coming off of the success of the Batman franchise and what Nolan did. And I would argue the exact opposite. This was at the height of Marvel. DC was starting a brand new universe, and people were not sold on Caval. And so it didn't do as well as it could have, but it still made it made $668 million at the box office, which in today's money is almost $1 billion. Whereas this Superman is going to struggle to even make $500 million. That's pretty crazy. That is pretty dang crazy. Eddie Cathegi confirms he has a multi-project deal to play Mr. Terrific in the DCU. This comes from Variety. I want to be involved in this universe in a major way, and whether or not that comes to fruition is just a matter of time and faith and other people's hard work. So he's in it for the long term if they will have him. Now, this was kind of interesting. James Gunn's Superman has hit a snag in India, not for action, but for its romance. India's Central Board of Film Certification removed 2 kiss scenes, most notably a 33-second mid-air kiss, deeming them overly sensual per local reports. Kind of funny. So Rob Lyfield posted this. He was the Deadpool creator. He said, these dudes with their adjusted inflation are the worst. Someone forgot to tell them the movie biz is down 25% post-pandemic. And then I had to chime in and I said, but tickets cost twice as much as Man of Steel, but tickets cost twice as much, and Man of Steel outperformed this film, and it's from 12 years ago. I said, that's sad. Also, many films have done well post-pandemic. This film is not the powerhouse they wanted. I said, when you adjust for inflation, you get a ticket-for-ticket comparison, and this film is down 33 to 50% versus Man of Steel, meaning we traded a true moneymaker for something less than. And I will stand by that. These people keep making all kinds of excuses. And what's crazy about Rob is his film, he wasn't a real big part of it, but Deadpool and Wolverine made over $1 billion. And he's sitting here trying to make excuses? Really? Grock even had to come in on this. It says, no, inflation hasn't prevented films from grossing $700 million worldwide post-pandemic. In fact, it boosts nominal figures. Many have surpassed it, like Spider-Man, No Way Home, and Avatar: The Way of the Water. Plus, I would say you had Barbie. You had also the film with Tom Cruise and the planes, Top Gun, Maverick. All of those overperformed. But it says, however, the overall box office is still down 25% from, right before the pandemic. But again, that's not an excuse with Superman because it's 33 to 50% less tickets, showing you the interest simply is not there. Now, I thought this was ridiculous. I really hope they don't jump to this too soon. But James Gunn has addressed the possibility of Lois Lane gaining powers in the new DCU. She has superpowers in the comics as we speak. I think about it every time I see her. And so he's considering doing this. It's funny how they want to take current stuff in comics, but they don't want to keep the tone of current comics. Very strange. Now, it's funny, Zack Snyder had not seen Superman as of yesterday. It says, Zack Snyder plans to see Superman ASAP. He said, this weekend I don't think I'm seeing it because I have a horse show. My kids ride horses, but I'm going to see it right after that. So he hasn't seen it as of yet. He hasn't posted anything about it. So over here on Twitter, I wanted to show you guys that James Gunn posted the first look at Supergirl. And it says, look out 2026. So it's not look up, it's look out. Because she's going to be a very belligerent, drunk individual in this film. And she's not going to be a role model for kids. That is dang sure. And it's very strange that they chose this version of the character, but of course they did, because it's James Gunn. Here's a little bit of a closer look at that photo. We did see her in Superman, but this was the first thing released by DC Studios in regards to a promotional piece for Supergirl. And I'll continue to cover all of this stuff as we move into these other productions, but we shall see. Also, I had to point out on X here that I said, remember when the first teaser for Superman hit and was the most watched trailer ever for Warner Brothers? They said the film is going to make $1 billion or more. What happened? Yes, what happened? We were told that that trailer was an indication of the box office, and it certainly wasn't, because it is not making the money that it needed to make to be a bona fide hit. All right, guys, so there you have it, my update for the week. Don't let anybody tell you, or for the day, don't let anybody tell you that this film is like uber popular when it's not. It is a mediocre film at best. The amount of people going to see it is nowhere near the levels of what Man of Steel had. It's nowhere near the levels of what a lot of these movies have had in the past. So it's not the big juggernaut they claim it's going to be, or that it is. You're going to see the studio shilling for it. You're going to see the media shilling for it. But you have to look at the facts, not at what the media is telling you. All right, guys, there's my update for the day. I do appreciate the support. We will see you on the next video.